Hi, I'm Brenda Reiss, freedom and forgiveness coach, and a person just like you that is learning to navigate life and all of its challenges. I teach a forgiveness process like no other. It's a blend of practical and spiritual forgiveness. This process guides you into knowing how unforgiveness can be keeping you stuck in your relationships, both personally and professionally, and how it prevents you from releasing resentment and finding joy. Each week, I share practical and some not so practical tips, tools, and advice from myself and other people that are on this journey just like us. This is for you if you are ready to turn your pain into peace. Welcome to the Forgive Yourself podcast. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Forgive Yourself podcast. I am your host, Brenda Reiss, and today I have, I think, one of the most joyful people I've ever met. My guest today is Joan Kpandei. I think I got this one right. And she's coming to us today from Nigeria. Now, Joan is a certified advanced grief specialist. She's also a certified grief-informed professional from PESI Eau Claire, Wisconsin. She's a certified grief and bereavement counselor from Center of Excellence, Manchester, United Kingdom. A certified Christian counselor from the International Institute of Faith-Based Counselors in Beaumont, Texas. And she's also a grief educator and advocate, trained by David Kessler. Is that okay to say, Joan?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's what we have in common. Joan hosts a weekly online talk show on Instagram called The Grief Show that seeks to create awareness on grief, talking about its effects, the grief processes, and guiding people to move forward. She works with corporations and churches, facilitating training sessions on grief and loss. She also works with human resource departments of organizations, and she provides one-to-one counseling and advisory services for grieving staff and management, which I think is beautiful and needed. And she also provides individual counseling for clients. Now, she's also the founder, is it called Gem Sisters Club? Oh,
yes.
I want to know more about this, which is a nonprofit organization that seeks to inspire, encourage, advocate, and restore hope to the brokenhearted and emotionally wounded. She also has a book, Give Your Pain a Voice, The Power of Talk, which throws light on the importance and essence of talk. Oh my gosh. Welcome, Joan. I am so thrilled to have you with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brenda.
Oh, you're so welcome. And okay, we have to know, because you have got the certifications, you've got all of this with grief. What drew you to the grief work?
Oh, wow. Thank you so much once again. Well, okay, so let me start by saying that this work found me. I didn't go looking for it. So in 2019, my mom became sick, and she became sick, and then she was diagnosed with leukemia, cancer of the blood. She was 72, yes.
Oh my.
And then in a period of about 8 months, we lost her. So she died November 25th, a month before Christmas.
Oh.
So that was where the journey started. So, of course, we buried her first in January, of 2020. And then I had to fly over to the US, because I have siblings in the US, to get some of her stuff, put things in order, and then come back home, take over her business. And then the COVID hit just when I got back home. And then everybody was stuck. Everybody was home. So I had to face the grief, because I'm a person of faith, a Christian faith. I remember saying in my heart that, okay, I've been there, done that, so what next, God? What next? And then I remember he was like, no, this is different. You have to process this. And I'm like, process, because when I said, oh, been there, done that, I lost the marriage in 2007, so of course my mom was there for me to walk me through. And of course, having my faith and all of that. So I felt, oh, okay, it's the same thing, and then it was like, nah, this is way different. and then having to go through my process, the pain. So I remember sitting on my bed and I said, what am I going to do with this pain? I have never walked this path before. This is the first major loss. Yes, I lost my grandfather, my mom's dad, but this is the first major one for me. My mom, and she was so close to us, very strong support system. I mean, she was in our lives every day, and so that's when I got into the David Kessler's Facebook group,
Yeah.
and that started the process. And then, of course, I was able to walk through my grief and all of that, and then in 2022,
Yeah.
just scrolling through Instagram, still trying to wonder, okay, no, I had this feeling, this burden to just call people around me who are grieving, and just pray. So, so I found the Facebook group, I would just go on and we would just pray and all of that. And that's how it gravitated to me just scrolling on Instagram one day and I see the certification from the Center of Excellence. And I'm like, it just hit me like a light bulb. Boom. This is your new path. This is what you should be doing now. And that's how I got into it, and just helping people in Nigeria and around grief, and they don't know what to do. So when somebody has a loss, they don't even understand what has hit them.
Yeah.
They just think they can jump back into life or push it away and say,
Yeah.
oh, okay, it's part of life. We just got to move on or move forward. So that has been the journey so far.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that
Thank
with
you.
us. And I'm so sorry for your loss of your mother because that is a deep one.
Hmm.
It is a deep one. And also the gift that came out of it, right?
Exactly.
Of this
Yes,
path
yes,
of yours. I
exactly.
mean, I think especially having faith, we do
Hmm.
look for the gift, right? In things. There is another side to loss. David Kessler talks
Hmm.
about us being grief illiterate,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
I think was powerful because we are. Because a lot of corporations, right? It's like you get 3 days off and then come back to work, right? And then that you should be over it. And some people who've
Hmm.
lost children or lost,
Exactly.
yeah, and they
True.
lose people and things. It's kind of like people don't understand. They don't want to face what it is. They don't want to face those emotions
Exactly.
and
True.
the deep grief. So, what do you think is grief? So, and when people say what is grief, what would you describe it as?
Okay. So, I mean, I would say that I like to say grief it's an intense,
Hmm.
feeling of sorrow,
Yes.
that we go through when we experience a loss. And that loss could be a death loss or a non-death loss.
Yes. Yes. The
So
non-death
that,
loss.
as short as that
Yeah.
is, that's what grief is.
Grief can be, yeah, I agree with that because grief can become like little waves, I call it, of grief, or it can become like a sucker punch to the stomach, like you've been punched in the
Hmm.
stomach, but I love
Hmm.
that you brought up
Hmm.
the non-death losses because
Exactly.
when we stop and think about it, we're grieving all the time. We're going through grief
Exactly.
on different
Exactly.
things of who we used to be or
Exactly.
relationships leaving. And I think, and you kind of touched on this, do you think we avoid grief because of the intense emotion?
Oh, yes. Yes. A lot of people do. Yeah, they do. Because grief is hard work, you
Mhm.
know. It is hard work. And it is a lonely journey
Yeah.
sometimes. It is. Because you have to face it. You have to face the pain. It's painful. So as human beings, we want to shy away from pain. We want to run away from pain. So people do avoid it. Yeah, that's what makes people avoid it. But avoiding your grief doesn't help, it doesn't
Thank you.
help at all.
No. Do you find that you have to encourage people to go through their grief? Is that what you do
Yes,
in your services, like when you're with the advocacy that you do and the coaching?
yes, yes. I do encourage people to be brave enough and courageous enough, to process their grief, and then also talk to society to let people grieve, because I see that people sometimes avoid their grief because of the fear of what people will say, or how people will treat them. Sometimes they're ostracized. Take for instance, somebody loses their spouse. Their friends, just desert them somehow. Maybe the mutual friends they had. So nobody wants that. So those are like the secondary losses that
Mhm.
we experience, that grievers experience. So people just, avoid it and say, oh, I'm okay, I'm all right. They get back right into work, and they just, there's always a post you after grief.
Yes.
It's a new you. You are
It
never
is.
the same person.
No. And that's, I think, what is amazing, right?
Hmm?
That is
Did
amazing
you
that
get that?
we actually are a different person on the other side of
Hmm.
grief. And
Yeah,
I think that's partly what people are afraid of, right? I mean, first of all, we don't like change. Second, we're not
exactly.
taught. Yeah.
At all. Exactly. Because grief is
Yes.
change.
And
Yeah.
then we're not taught how to handle our emotions and feelings. Nobody really teaches us about that. And so then having someone like you to walk through grief with would bring like such a big relief, because the one thing that I love about learning through David Kessler was the fact of grief needs a witness, and you get to
Exactly.
witness people in grief. And that takes a
Hmm.
huge heart, and it takes a lot of love, because they say that
Ex-
grief is love with nowhere to go when we lose
Nowhere to
someone.
go. Yeah.
Yeah, when we lose
Yeah,
someone.
exactly.
But then there's also the different kinds of grief that I know I'm going to talk with you about on your show, about the anticipatory
Hmm.
grief, like that I have witnessed and
Hmm.
gone through and still continue to go through, and the
Hmm.
ambiguatory grief. But what has been your experience? Have you worked with people who have major losses or different kinds of losses? What has been your experience in working with people, and especially corporations? You said that you like to work with corporations. So with corporations, what do you do, like with the human resources and with the staff? Have you had experiences there?
Oh, the.
What has been your
Hmm.
experience with that? Going into companies?
Um. Well, sometimes like you said, David says that people are grief illiterates.
Mhm.
People don't understand the depths, of the impact when um, someone loses a loved one, maybe a spouse or a child.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it could be women who's gone through miscarriages, you know, which is what we call disenfranchised grief. So them going back to work, and they don't know how to handle them. Sometimes you hear comments like, "Oh, you can have another baby." Oh, I mean, you had 2 weeks to grieve and to mourn. This is work, and all of that. So when we come in, of course, we work with the staff, you know, and then also with HR, to the human resource department, to let them understand. Listen, this person needs time. So if you see that the person breaks down, maybe in the office or something, the person can take 5 minutes, in the tea room or at the break time, just to go cool off. You have to take it easy with the person. You have to relax your targets, and your deadlines and all of that. So it's not too choking, for that individual, so the individual can feel that the company, it's not only about the bottom line, but that the company cares about their well-being, mental well-being and emotional well-being. because that also would help the productivity of the client,
Yes.
and which will impact the books, the bottom line for the company.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I love how you brought that up because there's different types of grief, even
Mhm,
divorce. When
of
people come
course.
back to work,
Exactly.
a
Exactly.
lot of people don't know what to say, and it's
Hmm.
like, oh, there's more fish in the sea. You'll get married
Exactly.
again. And it's like, no, this person, we don't know how this person, it could be like, yay, I'm happy I'm divorced, or they're devastated. And
Exactly.
so I like how you were suggesting some ways to support people in grief.
Hmm. Hmm.
And do you have any other suggestions for how to support like individuals, like friends or colleagues in grief? Is there any other suggestions
Oh
on how to
yes.
support
Oh
them?
yes, sure. Yes. One major way to support them is just show up. Show up with your presence. Show up with your presence. That's the most important thing. People shy away from grievers because they don't know what to say. Like I said earlier, people are not comfortable around grief. They're like, oh, let's not talk about the person who died. It might make her sad. It might make him cry. But I think and then I also say when you show up, take a cue from the griever, because you have different types of grievers. You have the instrumental grievers and you have the intuitive grievers. So take your cue from the griever. So if you come around and the person is all chatty, wants to talk, yeah, fine. And then if the person just wants to be quiet, then your silence is 100% welcome at that time. So show up for the person with your presence. That's the first thing. You don't have to have the right words to say. Silence speaks. It's golden
Yes.
at that time. But just knowing that you are there, bring food for them. Don't say, "Oh, you have an angel in heaven right now." Or it was time. God knew. It's best. All those
Mm-mm.
innuendos. They're empty. Yes, we understand where you're coming from, but they are empty platitudes. That's how it comes across. Because yeah, God needs an angel. Why didn't He take yours? Why mine?
Oh, that's power. Woo, woo. That gave me chills. Wow. That's so true. It's
Hmm.
so true. Oh my gosh. Thank you for that. And supporting, it's like there's ways that we don't have to that we can just say, I don't know what to say, but I'm
Hmm.
here
Hmm.
for you.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I don't know what to say,
Yes.
but I'm here for you. I'm going to bring some dinner over. Is that okay?
Exactly.
The
Yeah.
other thing people do is they say, "What do you need? I'm here for you." And it's like when you're,
Give me a call. Give me a
give me a
call if you
call.
want some. And they never call. A
No,
griever would not remember to call. So that's why I say
no.
you have to take the initiative. Take the initiative, because I
Yes.
remember when my mom passed, a friend of mine, she made a big pot of stew, chicken stew, and she brought to my house. And that's when I realized that, oh, wow, that's true. I actually needed that, you know.
Yeah.
So that took care of dinner and lunch for the kids for like 2 3 days, when
Yeah.
the news came and hit me before I was able to get myself.
Right.
So it's so important to do that.
Oh,
Just do
yeah.
that.
Just those little things make a big
Hmm.
difference. Or
They do.
even just a text or a call just to say,
Exactly.
I'm thinking of you. No, don't
Exactly.
call me back. No pressure. I'm just thinking of you.
Exactly.
Or a card
Exactly.
or something, because that helps the person know they're not alone.
They're not alone. Yeah.
Yes. So, how do you ever get the question, how long will this grief last?
Oh, yes, of course. People coming for counseling and they're like, oh, I just want this pain to go now. How long is it going to be? And I'm like, okay, I let them talk. I let them excel, do a lot of psychoeducation. And gradually, I break the news gently. I say, grieving never ends. It can last as long as you live. I said, but the thing I know is the pain, the intensity of the pain you're feeling right now, you know, wouldn't be the same if you process it. You go in and out like what we call the dual process, dual model process. You go in and in grief, sit with it, and
Mm-hmm.
then you come out, do your everyday activity in life and all of that. Over time, the pain will wane down, but you would always miss that person. You would always grieve the occasions when they're not there. First wedding, first graduation, and all of that. The future that person will never be in, you know, whether it's a divorce or the death of a loved one. So every time that comes up, you would grieve, but not as intensely as the initial onset of the news of the demise.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes. Thanks for saying that because my younger sister died this year.
Oh, I'm so
And
sorry, Brenda.
thank you. And she has two children,
Mm,
a 13-year-old daughter and a 19-year-old
mm,
son. So they're
mm,
still young.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And the something that I'm so happy to learn more about grief was because
mm-hmm.
the daughter and the son, the mom won't be there through all of
Exactly.
those firsts, through all of the
Yeah.
schools and the graduations
Mm-hmm.
and the
And
things
the weddings.
and the
Yeah.
weddings. So it is a constant
Mm-hmm,
grief,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Not as
Yeah.
maybe as intense, but it could be intense, right?
Yeah. Sometimes. Yeah.
It
Sure.
could be
Sure.
intense for people. So having that awareness that it just doesn't go away,
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
some people it can be 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
they're
True.
like every anniversary, they're like, wow, I really miss this person.
Miss
Or
this person. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I do want to touch on a little bit when we talk about non-death losses, that
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing that when we're grieving, it may not be as intense, but when we're grieving, like moving locations or losing jobs or
Exactly.
friendships
Friendship. Exactly.
or income or
Yeah.
when we're looking at
Not
different
meeting your goals.
not meeting your goals, it's a grief.
Yes,
and
it is.
and if we could honor that,
Mm-hmm.
take
Mm-hmm.
the time and be
Time.
sad and feel the feeling,
Exactly.
and then
Exactly.
and then go into action. I
Exactly.
think that would be really helpful for people.
Yes.
I hear a lot. People like are going, oh, I'm almost to the stage of acceptance in grief. I'm almost there. So these 5 stages that we hear, or like David talks about 6 stages,
Yeah.
you know, somebody said that the other day to me. It's like, I'm getting angry now. So I know I'm getting closer to acceptance. And I said, what?
Uh,
Could you touch a little on that, on these 5 stages, and that maybe they don't go
yeah.
in order?
Oh, the funny thing about I think in the the school of grief, people talking about grief now and all of that. The thoughts that people are beginning to have now is they don't want to use that word stages anymore. Yeah, or phases because they see, like what you said, people are waiting to finish one stage and then they expect to be in another stage
Yes.
and then they expect to be. No, grief is not linear. It's not, you
No.
know, you go in and out. I like to say you oscillate
Oh,
when you're
that's
in grief. You go in and out. You're moving this way, you're moving that way. You're in the grief, you feel it, you process it, you come out, experience, have new experiences, new joys, and then you go back again. That's how it is. So it's not linear. Yes, it was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was talking after, sitting with cancer patients. And she saw their reactions. And of course, before she died, she came out to say, no, that's not what I was trying to say. It's not a straight line. It's not linear. It's so different. People go in and out of it. So yeah, it's not. So when people say, oh, I'm angry now. Okay, I've left the shock stage. I'm angry. So I expect, you know, I expect to get into the depression now, the bargaining. I'm going back and forth, and then so some people might be like, okay, I'm in the depression stage now. I'm just waiting for the acceptance. And then they find themselves back at anger. And they're like, because they can become so focused on the stages, wanting to end one stage to the other. And then they become trapped and stuck
Yes.
because they're going back and forth,
Yeah.
So it's not linear at all. It's not.
And I always say that grief is its own animal.
Oh,
I
yes.
mean, it's its own animal. And, going through my experience just this year with my
Mm-hmm.
sister, that denial
Mm-hmm.
phase is real. It was so
Mm-hmm.
strange, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, she's right.
Mm-hmm.
No, this
Yeah.
can't be true, right? No,
Exactly.
it's
Mm-hmm.
not true.
Mm-hmm.
Even seeing her
Mm-hmm.
body was like, yeah, she's going to get
Yeah.
up anytime.
You
I mean,
know.
it was so, and having that and then going through at different times, it's like, okay, I'm in
Mm-hmm.
acceptance. I got this. Boom, bounce right back.
Boom.
Boom,
Exactly.
bounce right back
Exactly.
to anger and confusion. And, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was a wild ride.
It is. It's
It,
like it's a roller coaster.
it is a roller coaster. And I really encourage people to have someone to walk with them through this.
Yes.
And someone like you, like reach out for grief counselors or coaches, or
Exactly.
do you work with individuals also?
Yes, I do. I work with individuals one on one. I do group therapy. Working groups.
Right.
Yeah. So anyone who's experienced loss, whether it's a non-death loss or a death loss, I work with them. Yeah. So I'm
Right.
open to work with. Yes.
And what is a way for people to find out more information about you? What is
Oh,
the
I
best?
mean, Instagram. They can reach me on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah. And
Okay.
also on grief.com, the David Kessler. So they
Yeah,
can
I
always
like
reach me
that.
there.
Yeah, we are
Hmm.
going to put that in the comments. And I really like that you have a weekly show on your Instagram.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so I will encourage people to visit you there, because that would
Hmm.
be amazing.
Hmm.
And,
True. Thank you.
I wanted to ask, and I'm also going to put your book on there too. I'm going to put a link to your book.
Yes.
And but I wanted to ask you, as we've talked a little bit,
Hmm.
forgiveness and grief. Forgiveness and
Oh.
so forgiveness has touched your life a lot.
Hmm. Yes.
How do you see forgiveness and grief together?
Well, you know, when we experience a loss, I guess that's when we need a lot of forgiveness because it depends on the kind of relationship you had with the person. You know, not until after my mom died, I realized that I had to go through that part.
Mm.
I had to forgive my dad, you know, I had to forgive my siblings
Mm-hmm.
who I was supposed to be. I had to forgive my mom who also passed. You
Yes.
know, I had to forgive her also. I had to forgive myself, you know, maybe being too harsh on her and say, oh, you need to eat so you can leave the hospital. I'm tired, we need to go, and all of that. So
Mm.
forgiveness, has played a major move forward with life. And also, forgiveness, I had to forgive people who I was expecting to be there for me
Mm.
and they weren't there. And that's where I see a lot of people get stuck, and then anger, resentment, bitterness comes in. Expectation,
Yeah.
expectation is good. There's nothing wrong with you having expectations. But you know what? People will always be people. Sometimes they won't show up, so don't focus on those people who are not showing up. If you look inward, you will see there's someone else showing up for you. So forgive them because they're not comfortable around grief.
Mm-mm.
Because sometimes if you haven't experienced the loss, in this walk that I've noticed, if you haven't experienced the loss, people are just sympathetic. They are not empathetic.
Mm.
Because if you've experienced the loss, then you would understand and offer comfort to them.
Oh, oh my God, that was so powerful, Joan. Thank you.
Thank
Because
you.
there's a difference between the empathy and the sympathy that you were sharing about. It's huge.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And thank you. Those people that have had some understanding. That's another thing too, is letting people know, maybe I don't understand exactly what you're going through, but I have an understanding.
Exactly.
Right? So, oh my gosh, this was so good. Oh, I thank you so much, Joan, for your wisdom and sharing your
Thank you.
experience.
My pleasure.
I'm going to put in the show notes all where people can reach you, learn more about you, and to reach out to you, because on your Instagram you do offer a lot of guidance
Yes.
on grief, and I love that you've specialized in this, because especially in a world that we live in today, we are experiencing grief all the time.
Exactly.
And
every time.
Yep, the more we can educate ourselves and each other about it, I think the better off, because we can bring in more love that way and more compassion and understanding, starting with ourselves, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Is there anything you would want people to know about grief or you before we leave today?
Oh, well, I always like to end with my quotes, to say that when the waves of grief hits you, just learn to surf it. Don't struggle with it, but just learn to surf it. And know that everyone experiences grief, everyone. If you live long enough, you would experience loss somehow. You would go through grief. Whether your kids are going off to college as an empty nester, you will grieve that, and all of that. And just know that there is help for you, there are people, there's support. So reach out.
Oh, thank you. That's powerful. Just right there, reach out, because we all need help. It's not a weakness, it's a strength. And the more that we can help each other, the better that we will be able to navigate this world together.
Exactly.
So thank you so much, Joan.
Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did enjoy it, would you do me a favor and share this episode, and then follow us on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss one episode of the Forgive Yourself podcast, where every Friday you will get tips, tools, and stories so that you can turn your pain into peace. Take care.